out of here. New York City had kind of an interesting primary for like two reasons. Andrew Yang did horrible and already dropped out, and we saw ranked choice voting kind of in fruition. So I don't know if you want to because you shared some articles, and I think you said you were even working a little bit in this New York City primary. So what do you think of this primary, man? Eric Adams is right now leading. He's a controversial character, and in my opinion, probably the worst one.
Yeah. So I can't exactly disclose what I'm doing with the
Right.
New York primary, but
Absolutely.
I do work in political media and political, and part of that includes political intelligence. So I've been keeping track of the spending some of these candidates have been doing for that primary. But outside of that, I mean, I'm in LA. We're not in New York. But it's important to keep this race under check, because anyone that becomes a New York mayor, um, kind of has America's mayor's title, and as well as obviously, New York City is so large and so vast and requires such a certain type of governance that if you're the mayor of New York City, you're immediately on the upper echelon of the political field, right? You're now immediately recognizable name. You can now go for governorships. You can become a senator, or you can run for president, right? It's definitely different than being the mayor of Cleveland, right? Like, could you and I name the mayor of Cleveland? No, hell no.
No.
I bet you half the people in Cleveland couldn't name the mayor of Cleveland. Whereas the mayor of New York, I think, has a much larger stamp on American politics and the culture around it. So, with that said, a lot of people are following this race. And then one thing is that like you mentioned, is it has ranked choice voting. This is something being put into practice in a few instances. I think it happened in San Francisco. It's happening now in New York, but it's not the usual way we do it in America. So what they're doing is, instead of just you vote for one in a primary and whoever wins the most takes it, now it is you can vote based on ranked. I think it was up to 12 or 13, so quite a few ranks you can put, I think.
In this one, it was only five. I
Oh,
think.
five. Okay, so I think there's 13 candidates total, but you can put five. Got it. Okay, my bad. So you can put your five. So I could put Yang first, Garcia second, Adams third, and so what happens is, if someone wins the majority over 50% of the first round, then they've won. But after that, everything past that, if it's pluralities, then it takes the ranked choice voting. You start eliminating the bottom and then going by those people's second choices, and so you start accumulating votes. And in fact, I actually there was a really good infographic right here. This is a great infographic. So you can see here, the votes go here, and then as people start getting eliminated, the second and third choices start bolstering these other candidates. So we're watching here, Yang still around, Yang goes out, Wiley goes out. So now we're down to Garcia and Adams, and we're in round 11. And now our numbers are here. And by the way, Garcia has come back quite a bit very recently, and we'll talk about it in a bit. So ranked choice voting has happened. It's a new style, and it's an interesting style. People on the right and the left are proponents of this. Some of the reasons people are proponents, this guy in the Hill describes it as it discourages negative campaigning, because you want to make sure that if you're not first on someone, you want to be second. You don't want to, let's say I'm a Garcia fan, and Andrew Yang wants me to put him second. He should not attack Garcia a ton, because maybe I then don't want to put Yang second. So if you kind of follow where I'm going, you kind of want to be buddy-buddy with some people, unless it's the front runner, maybe. And then their argument is it also promotes more centrist candidates, because you can, let's say you're less likely to have to be forced into an extreme candidate versus the boring guy because of ranked choice voting. So yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think it's super cool, and it has produced a pretty centrist candidate. So I don't know, what's your analysis of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I actually am not the biggest fan of ranked choice voting. First off, I think in theory, I mean, no, you summed it up perfectly. And I think in theory it is true that it leads to, more cooperation between candidates, instead of this vitriolic thing that we've seen more and more over the last decade. And, for example, Yang and Garcia actually campaigned together towards the end. So now that's probably why, in my opinion, she might be now jumping up, is because there's probably a lot of shared votes between her and Yang. And now that he's dropped out,
She gets him.
that exactly. Now my problem is with it is that I read a really good piece. Let me pull up the name of the article. It's called the Democracy Journal, and it's coined as the Journal of Ideas. But in 2016, I want to say it was, they put out an article that talks about how ranked choice voting ensures that no fringe candidate can win, like you mentioned, right? Like a Donald Trump arguably would not win in ranked choice voting because he won with a majority of voters, but enough of a majority that was more than other majorities. Or sorry, minorities, not majorities. He won with enough of a minority that he won over Hillary Clinton. Arguably. Now, let's not go down that rabbit hole, but you know what I mean. Like, you're not going to have a crazy hardcore partisan. And so, but this Democracy Journal argues that there's actually an issue with exhaustion that comes out of this process, is because basically you are required to choose, whatever it is, 5 or 8 candidates. And this has happened because Australia and the United States both do this. They're the only countries I could find that have tried this out. And so this Democracy Journal uses this example. Say there are 5 candidates, like this New York City primary, that you can vote for. Yet the voter ranks only 3 of them. And this actually happened quite frequently in San Francisco. In San Francisco, 10% of voters did not actually list 5 candidates. They only listed 3 because of just exhaustion. They're like, screw it. Like, one of these people, maybe. And so the problem is, some of these people they listed never even made it past the first round or got eliminated right away. And then there were not 2 to 5 other options. So it just kind of led to their first choice one, which could be good in theory. It also might not be. But basically, this article found that in San Francisco, close to 10% were exhausted just through voting and did not actually put down 5 people. And in Australia, up to 30% in the first round of a congressional election didn't even put down all 5 people possible. And so then the other thing is that they found the majorities might not be convincing. In 2010, the Australian Labor Party won the House with 38% of first place votes on the ballot, while the second place Liberal National Coalition had 43%. So it was an interesting, and I'll be honest, I don't exactly know how the Australian politics work in this, but basically a party that won 38% of the first place vote beat the second place, which had 43% of the vote. I don't know how that happened, but it, to me, doesn't make sense on paper, right? And so, to me, Eric Adams, yes, like, putting it back to this election, Eric Adams is the most, like, centrist candidate, ex-Republican, kind of used his own version of identity politics in a way, kind of fired up, but he was also hard on law and order, right?
Yeah, he's
To
an
me,
ex-NYPD.
yes, exactly. But he also is, like, kind of nuts. Like, arguably, I've seen reports he doesn't live in New York. He lives in Jersey. He's staying at his son's apartment in New York. He's said some weird things over the years. Basically, you can't criticize him. Like, there's news press conferences where he says, "Are you racist?" every time people try to criticize him. I think he's the worst case possible candidate, and so he is the centrist. But in a world where we need solutions and pragmatism and, like, things getting done, I almost feel like he might be the worst guy. He's just this kind of quirky guy who's divisive. But
Yeah,
rant aside, yeah,
I don't think he's a very good candidate. However, it makes sense that with the increase in crime, which has happened in New
yeah,
York, that someone who's more, protection, NYPD oriented, would do well. Yang only had the name recognition at the beginning, and then said some weird stuff, and then it's kind of a quirky guy, and I think people got out of it. Your point about fatigue though is interesting because it's absolutely worth bringing up. Um, but I don't see it as a problem worse than the ones we have in the current system, right?
that's
So,
fair.
so like, yeah, I see what you mean about 5. Maybe you do only 4, or maybe even only 3, right? Or you limit the amount of rounds. Like, you can adjust and I don't know what the hell happened with that Australia thing with I mean, whatever they're doing over there is not correct. I don't know what that is. Maybe I have to look into that further. You certainly should not have it set up so that someone wins who has less votes. That's not how it's supposed to work. But I do think it's worth doing ranked choice voting because this, I think so many times, man, we come across so many elections where so many people feel. I mean, Joe Biden versus Trump, Hillary Clinton versus Trump was just like, how did we get to these people on both sides? Like, how is this the best we could come up with? And so many people feel that way that I feel like ranked choice gets us a little bit closer. But that being said, I don't think it's a panacea, right? I don't think we'll never have a radical candidate. And frankly, I think, you know, I don't know. Who knows what could have happened, but someone like Trump still could have maybe pulled it out, even with ranked choice, because of his rhetoric and how many people he can whip up, right? So it's not like a always going to work to the most centrist candidate, but I just think it offers people more agency and more variety in the way they vote. They can think about things, I think, a little bit deeper than they normally do. Now, will people do that? It's hard to say, right? It's almost like you want to lead the horse to the water, but can you make it drink? I don't know. A good example is the people that don't put all the names they need to. I mean, what can you do with that? Some people just don't give a shit about politics, but I still think that problem to me is not great enough to prevent me from trying ranked voting because I think it solves other problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think we can both agree that it would probably take away some of the divisive, like cutthroat nature of elections.
Yeah,
And I do just like I do worry too. I mean, we saw what happened just with mail-in voting in the 2020 election, where there was even a couple days where Trump was able to sow chaos, waiting just for Biden to be announced as the winner. And I mean, there's some
true.
people who think we won't even know these results until early July or even
Yes. It
mid-July.
does mean
Like
longer elections. You're very right.
and like where we're going right now. I feel like if you had a demagogue who could be losing and gets desperate, there's a lot of time to sow confusion, and so like maybe the solve all with that or to that would be maybe speed up this process or find a way to get these results quicker.
Sure,
Um,
sure. Absolutely. I mean, always that. But I mean, and look, man, I don't think we should slow progress down for the dumbest rock. Like, do you know what I
no,
mean? Like,
no, you're
if
right.
this is a better way to do elections, I don't think we should avoid it just because some idiots that or were convinced by the My Pillow guy don't understand it. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, okay, well, you don't understand it. Real people in reality do, and this is a better way to do elections sometimes. I don't.
Absolutely.
So I see what you're saying, though. I mean, there's certainly that.
I mean, it did lead to tangible violence, though.
No, no, you're right. You're right. It's not to be ignored. You're certainly right that it would mean longer elections, but it would mean so we have to educate people on why these elections would be more representative in the long run. Not everyone's going to get convinced of that. That's okay. That's okay. But I don't think we should
Yeah.
not. We should definitely not do policy out of the worry that some people might be too stupid to understand it.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say one thing about like Yang real quick is
Sure.
that like I did a catching up a month ago where I kind of saw him as a shoe in. And to me in the 2020 election, he was this kind of shiny new object who was weird and quirky, but he was also bold and controversial. And people felt like he was talking to them and being genuine. And I mean, arguably UBI has done pretty well for him in the last year, especially with COVID. Like the conversation's changed.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like the issue is that I was reading yesterday in the New York Times that he hired the consulting class that worked with Bloomberg. He
Jesus.
tried to
What?
rely to like he lost that appeal because he became somewhere in the process a typical New York establishment politician who came off as out of touch. He said cringy things about the Asian community. He's like, I'm Asian, I know doctors. It's like, all right, man,
Uh,
like stay away from the identity stuff, man. Like
yeah, for
people
real.
liked you because you're like a quirky, cool guy who's rich but also fun. Like stick with that. And I feel like he lost his appeal. And at the same time, like I don't like Eric Adams. I think he's kind of brought out some of the worst of like almost both sides in a weird way. But he does, I think, show that Democrats maybe need to take crime more seriously
Yes.
because like all the progressives did not do well in this election. It was the centrist who's a little bit quirky but hardcore on crime, and Biden's already said that they're going to focus on this in Maryland and other parts, and I think that's accurate.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think the progressives lose a lot of people when it comes to crime because while I 100% agree with the progressive left on reforming police departments and all that, reformative justice and everything, we also are seeing a massive crime wave, and we do need policing. I'm not out here saying defund the police. So you're absolutely right. The progressives lost New York when they can't address crime, and so very astute point. Yang, you're absolutely right. Just too cringy, man. Too weird. But brought up good conversations. Yeah. So, well, but all this to say is, so keep an eye out on this election. Also, Garcia is getting a lot of these second, third ranked choice votes, so she is catching up rapidly. So Adams is not a shoo-in anymore. It really could go either way, and there's, I still think, 120,000 absentee ballots still out. So we don't know the winner yet. It's kind of exciting. And then yeah, dude, I've worked with Bloomberg's like media agencies back in 2020. Through my company, and they suck, man. They really don't know what they're doing. So the fact that's not surprising. Like Yang hired, Bloomberg's consultants and stuff. Probably has got some of the same media advice. It's not good. They're not good.
No.
So you can see the results. Yeah, pretty wild. So to wrap this up, though, quick, hot take. John McAfee.
Oh yes,
Suicide or not? Epstein or not?
Okay. I was actually talking to my buddy last night. We actually had a pretty long FaceTime, and this actually came up. Like, putting on your tinfoil hat. No one condemned me for this. I do think that it's likely he killed himself, but he had a quote that said, "If you find Epstein hanging, I'll be next." He also, his wife and his lawyer and him said, "If I'm found dead by suicide, it wasn't suicide. I'll release all my documents." Weirdly enough, there are conspiratorial reports that say that condo in Florida. He actually owned a condo in that Florida, and his death and that collapse were within a couple days. People say that the documents he wanted
to owned one of the condos in Florida.
Yes.
What?
Yes, and apparently, if that's true, that's also where he had all the files and the computers that would have released damning information.
I don't know, man. That's fun. Like, that's a fun conspiracy. No, I mean, not fun. Obviously, it's a super terrible tragedy what happened in Florida, but that's an interesting conspiracy to think about. But I don't know.
Also, there's a video in Catalonia where they basically say he left a suicide note. Like, the Spanish authorities say, yeah, there was a suicide note. There's a picture of some sort of paper, and then it was never found or read. Weird stuff, man. I don't know. But obviously, this guy was in Belize. Pretty much had a compound where he enforced curfews. He got super paranoid. He killed one of his neighbors, allegedly. Over them. And obviously there's people that hated this guy. So it would not surprise me if he was killed. And also he was being extradited to the US when he was found dead in this Catalonian jail cell. I don't know, man. What do you think?
I have no clue, dude. Cause the thing about if I find me dead, it wasn't suicide. That's always super sketch. But I watched it wasn't no BBC. It was a YouTube documentary, right? So let's just caveat that I have no freaking clue if any of what I saw was true. But I watched this YouTube, a mini YouTube documentary about him and about that stuff with the neighbor, how he thought he was being he thought because his neighbor got shot in Belize, and no one knows who did it, and they all thought it was John McAfee, but then he got cleared. But then he went on the run, he was on the run in his mind from the Belizean authorities or whatever, but he wasn't. He thought he was gonna get caught, so he escapes to Honduras or something, and then they caught him there without a visa. And they're like, "Hey man, you're here illegally, you need to get a travel visa or something." And he's like, "You're gonna extradite me to Belize? I'm fucked. And then Belize, the Belize authorities were like, "No, we don't want him. We're not. There's no warrant for his arrest at all. He's fine. I don't know what he's doing over there." And so he didn't he thought he was getting chased when he wasn't. So I think from what I understand, this guy was kind of paranoid and crazy.
Yeah.
But the circumstances around his death are pretty weird. I don't know if it's wife or girlfriend. I think his wife. He has a wife that says that she believes he was murdered. He doesn't believe he was suicidal. All the stuff with the thing, So I don't know, man. It's crazy, but this guy lived in a different type of world than you and me, man. He was paranoid, compounds. He faked reports to the media in real time. I watched that part of the documentary was he was with one reporter who was capturing. He was with one reporter in Belize. It was a Vice guy with a camera, and he was also calling a different reporter in Mexico saying that he was captured in Mexico to get the media off his trail. So you're watching him lie to a reporter in Mexico, lying that he was captured, and they're like, and then they report it like an hour later, and then Vice goes like, no, you're wrong. It's like, what? It was craziness. So I have no idea what to believe. I don't think I'll ever know what to believe with John McAfee, but I will know that I will never be updating that freaking antivirus on my computer, because they put them in, like these computers, they put in McAfee antivirus and you get like a free month, and then it always says, do you want to buy it now, like you got your free month of McAfee, do you want to buy it now? And so no, I don't, John.
I've, yeah, goddamn, John, what are you doing, man? I do think it's somewhat ironic that the guy who made some of the first like internet security programs in the U.S. also is a guy who's always afraid for his own security. It
Yeah,
seems to me very fitting that he would develop this antivirus software. I do think because he was quoted saying now that if I hang myself a la Epstein, it will be no fault of mine. I think the internet is fixated on Jeffrey Epstein because let's be honest, I mean, I think it's very likely he did not kill himself.
sure.
So I think now everyone is looking at all of these weird cases
Like
and
Epstein's.
yes.
Yeah.
And John McAfee, like you said, I agree with you. I think he's an egomaniac. I would like to entertain the idea that he had a condo in that collapsed building and that he was avoiding the US extradition. But it's also likely that he realized he was fucked
But
and he
like,
ended his life.
he was trying to get extradited to the U.S. for like a cryptocurrency fraud. Like it's not
Right,
like he was.
right.
It's not like he was a terrorist. Like it's not like like I don't know. I feel like he might have got a couple years. It would have been fine. Like you know what I mean? Like he would have gotten a white collar crime slap on the wrist. Couple years, you're chilling. But it's like, so I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the suicide note stuff and his comments that he's like, I will not kill myself, is definitely sketch. But he was also kind of had a couple screws loose, and I imagine, I'm not trying to make light of it. He could have had some mental health problems that we don't understand, right? So the idea that it is suicide is also, I think, just as likely.
Yeah. And I mean, I just look at it. He kept claiming that if he ever was killed by someone, he would make sure he'd have documents released. I haven't seen any documents yet. And I don't trust the guy. He was an antivirus software guy, yoga expert, lifestyle guru, murderer, cryptocurrency,
Alleged murderer.
alleged murderer, excuse me. But I do know that he set up a curfew in this village that he was in Belize. So he sounds like a guy that would be probably like tough to deal with.
Yeah, I think he's got some pretty legendary Reddit Ask Me Anythings.
I would love to
Um,
get a I would love to get a beer with him, but sadly that's never happening.
um, all right, well, that should probably wrap it up for today's episode of the Tonic Accord podcast. Well, I don't know why my camera is off. I guess it turned off at some point. Um, but it was on for most of it. I've been keeping track. I think it was in the
It
last
was,
few
yeah.
minutes. But anyway, thank you for watching, folks. This has been the Tonic Accord. We are live on Twitch every Tuesday around 5 p.m. Pacific time, and then you can catch our content on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and a variety of other podcast sites. So check us out there. Comment what you think, and catch us next time.
A vida sen, amigos.